Hello, dear friends. Today we are in the day 55 of this war. It's kind of incredible for me to realize this number. I recall the days when I started this live updates on the situation in Ukraine. It was like day 1, day 2, day 3, and we were told at that time that it's like the task for the Ukrainian army to hold at least for 3 days, so that NATO countries and generally Western world reacts to this war and stops Putin in some way, or puts some obstacles on his way to take over Ukraine. Thanks God, and thanks to our army and the support of people in Ukraine and internationally, we have been able to stand firm for 55 days. And today, as the battles are still raging in Ukraine, I'm reporting again on the situation on the ground with a lot of enthusiasm and hope and trust in God and in the strength of our soldiers, but also with a lot of confusion and fear about the future of this country, because the processes we are observing these days in Ukraine are extremely disturbing. I will speak today in a little bit more detail later about the city of Mariupol, which was and still remains the focus of our attention and of our prayers. But also generally the situation in Ukraine is very threatening. First of all, there is this battle of Donbass that kind of was expected for many days, but now it's actually happening. It does not happen in the way we were expecting, like huge advances of Russian military on two fronts. It's more kind of local fights here and there, but very intensive. And we are hearing threats of the use of nuclear weapons. Obviously, this threat is here all the time. We have been contemplating this since the beginning of the war, especially after Russian troops were defeated in some parts of Ukraine and they had to withdraw. And that was the beginning of the speculations by various military experts that in this difficult situation for the Russian army, they might at some point opt for the use of tactical nuclear weapons. And tactical means nuclear missile with a limited range of destruction, usually something like 10 miles, which is obviously huge and terrible, but it's not the strategic missiles that can wipe out cities like New York and so on. So we hope it doesn't happen, but there are threats, official threats from Russia that these weapons might be used. So far they are expressed in a kind of negative way, but we understand what's behind it. Today the foreign minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, said that so far the use of nuclear weapons is not the option Russia wants to go with. But generally from the context of this phrase, it was clear that they are thinking about it. But so far we have various local missile strikes. All of you probably heard already that yesterday the city of Lviv, where I am located, was hit with a number of missiles. Sometimes they're quoting 4 or 5. It probably depends on which targets are counted, but they hit some supposedly military infrastructure. It's not clear, but probably some warehouses next to the railroads in Lviv. And here on this picture you can see a car service that was hit by one of the rockets, and it was completely civilian object. They destroyed like 40 cars there, and unfortunately 7 to 9 people are reported dead by various sources. I couldn't figure precise number as of this moment, and number of people wounded, including one child. Ironically, the 3-year-old child who came with his mother from Kharkiv, fleeing the war, and with this bad luck, they were still hit by the rocket here in Lviv. Luckily, nothing threatens the life of the child. It was a rather minor wound that this boy suffered, and he will be discharged from the hospital soon. But unfortunately, several civilians died in this rocket strike. Now to the city of Mariupol. Yesterday we had a video posted by some defenders of Mariupol from the city. Generally, the situation is like 3/4 of the city are already taken over by Russian side, and only industrial part of the city adjacent to a huge steel factory called Azov Stal is still controlled by Ukrainian fighters. The reason why these industrial quarters are still controlled is because they have very deep basements in which they can survive bombardments and rocket strikes. And there are several hundred, or by some counts up to 1,000 of civilians in those basements, those civilians that cannot surrender to Russians because they are afraid for their lives, or they don't want to surrender, and they stick to the military guys in those basements. And as I'm speaking in these hours, the city of Mariupol, the remaining part under the control of Ukrainian military, is being severely bombed and shelled by all kinds of weaponry and from the aircrafts. And people who are, these are real pictures of the people who are still in those basements. As you can see, there are children, women, little boys. It looks like an underground refugee camp with hundreds of people there, and the bombs that are dropped on their heads are 1 to 3 tons bombs, specifically designed for destruction of bunkers underground. So obviously the target is the military people who are there, but Russians do know about the civilians that are hiding there too, and additionally to some 20,000 people, civilian people, or maybe more, that already died in Mariupol. Those children you see here, and their parents can be victims of the same military crime, wiping out the city of Mariupol from the face of the earth. Our fighters who defend the city, the Azov regiment and others, are still holding the ground fast. We saw some videos from yesterday that are taking counter-attacks to push Russian troops further from there, but obviously with the full control of the sky and the full control in artillery, Russians can destroy those premises eventually and kill all these people. We are praying fervently in Ukraine for the city of Mariupol and their defendants, and we hope that there will be some eventual change of the situation in the front so that our troops can deblocade the city before all these people are dead. Now I'm turning to the territories that have been freed up from Russians recently, and more and more war crimes come to the light after the liberation of these villages and towns. And this picture represents a basement that was used as a temporary prison facility for just for Ukrainian citizens, basically, with names of people who were held there and an improvised calendar, and then family names of people who were detained in this facility. And this reminds me very much of our history of the Soviet period, when people were tortured by the Bolsheviks in the 30s and 40s, held in various basements. They would always scratch their names on the prison cells, and if you come to Ukraine, you see some of the museums from that area, from that time. They will always have something like that, also in Nazi concentration camps. And unfortunately, this picture is a very symbolic that history is repeating itself in these terrible moments of our modern present-day history. This is a screenshot from the Telegram, from a social network, in which Russian propagandists, Russian journalists who are accompanying Russian army, officially state that there are two cities, Kherson and Mykolaiv, in the southern Ukraine, and Kherson is being controlled by Russian troops at the moment, and Mykolaiv was very heavily shelled by missiles last night. And they are saying here that if you citizens of Mykolaiv, if you want to be as safe as your neighbors in the city of Kherson, please please turn to the Russian side, join us, and then you will have peace. Your city will not be shelled, which is an obvious terrorist rhetoric. So if you don't want to be shelled, if you don't want to be killed, you have to accept our terms and turn to our side. I think there is a talk nowadays in the West of recognizing Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism, and I think this is like a good example of this terrorist logic that is being introduced in the Russian media and propagated to Ukrainian public, so that they seize all the resistance and surrender to the Russian invaders. Just few more illustrations how this propaganda machine is working in Russia, and that it's not only state-sponsored, but it's actually sometimes supported by people, because these many illustrations that we are seeing in the media clearly prove the fact that it's not only Russian state, but oftentimes Russian people, like grassroots initiatives that unfortunately support this war and even these terrible atrocities against civilians. In this case, it's a real T-shirt that is being sold on the internet, designed by some Russian designers. And it has, as you can see, a slaughtered pig in the center, and it says slaughter in Bucha, we can repeat. And so they use these two symbolic letters Z and V. So slaughter in Bucha, which obviously refers to the atrocities in the town of Bucha next to Kiev, and the phrase "we can repeat" that has been repeatedly used in Russian propaganda regarding Russian victory in the World War II. So "we can repeat" usually is addressed to Germans. So if you are not friends with us, we can take over Berlin again, or whatever is meant by this phrase. But in this case, it's even more terrible because it's such a arrogant statement, basically mocking the victims of the genocide in Bucha, comparing them to pigs and claiming that we can do it over and over again. Another example is this terrible thing with Easter bread that is popular in Central Europe. We call it Pascha, like little sweet loaves of bread, and you can see them decorated with Easter bunny and with Z letter. That means it's certainly not state-sponsored initiative. It's somebody just invented, and there will be people who will be buying this. So sometimes it's difficult to understand what's going on in the minds of people who are subject to Russian state propaganda. Here is another shocking picture in the vicinity of Kiev, in those various towns like Bucha, Hostomel, Irpin, where many people were killed on their way from fleeing the front zone. And usually these were families with children who were simply shot in their cars. So now they took all those cars to one place, and there is this huge cemetery of cars. You can see only a small fragment of it here on the picture, but these are cars, minivans, buses that were shot at by Russian soldiers from the tanks, heavy armed vehicles, with people usually killed inside, and then some of those cars were burned down and some were just abandoned and later evacuated by Ukrainian authorities when they returned. So something completely new, this cemetery of abandoned cars. But there are also good news. Here is another symbolic picture from the city of Bucha, and you have seen this picture in the top of a street that was like full of abandoned, burned down tanks after heavy fighting that was taking place there in I guess in late February, in the last days of February or early March. And now there is this street today. It's completely cleaned from this burned down machinery and is returning to its peaceful, normal way of life. As we enter in the Easter season here in Ukraine, we celebrate Easter the coming Sunday on our calendar. The next few days will be the Passion, Triduum, and there will be many church services and so on. I will probably have no time and no possibility to record more videos unless, God forbid, something urgent happens. I hope not. But after Easter I will hopefully come back to these live updates from Ukraine. In the meantime, I'm asking you to support us with your prayers. Many people are asking me what should we do more to support Ukraine, and obviously, as you all know, it's hard to influence politicians. It's hard to pressure them into doing something more decisive to help Ukraine. Obviously, we need more effective heavy weapons that should have been given to us long ago. Would be best if they were given to us before the war, but even during this war it's already almost 2 months, and the situation is only getting worse and worse. But we hope that some politicians in the West eventually grow up and understand that this war can be stopped only by force. Unfortunately, no diplomacy, no peace talks is possible in this situation, because the Russian side is not going to stop. They're claiming that openly, that the military operation is developing according to the plan, and they are not going to stop despite all the losses from both sides. And we have no choice but to stop them by force. So that's what we need from the Western politicians. But from ordinary people, we need moral support, prayer, and if possible also financial support for the Ukrainian army and for refugees here in Ukraine, which you can give to many funds, foundations that are raising money in the West. And if you want to help our small volunteering initiative, the description will be under this video. Please donate. But first of all, remember us in your prayers in these days of Easter, and we hope that the joy of Easter, the joy of the resurrection, will eventually prevail over the terrible, desperate situation of this war. Thank you for listening. Please share, please like this video so that more people can see them. Thank you very much.